I saw my husband cradle a baby in his arms, and the mother wasn't me. I stood frozen outside the hospital nursery, clutching a bouquet meant for someone else, watching my husband smile at a child I had no idea existed. He looked happy, unburdened, natural, like a man who had just stepped into fatherhood for the first time. The baby had his eyes, almond-shaped, deep brown, familiar in a way that twisted something sharp inside me. The mother was young, early 20s maybe. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun and her cheeks glowed with that postpartum softness. She leaned into him like she belonged there, like they had done this before, many times, like this was their world and I was just the shadow outside the glass. My throat burned with the weight of every lie he had ever told me. But let me go back, because the truth didn't hit me all at once. No, it came slowly, like water seeping under a locked door. A smirk here, a missed call there, a name dropped in passing that meant nothing, until it meant everything. It started 2 months ago, at a charity gala we always attended together. I wore the same sapphire dress he once said made me look unforgettable. That night, I felt invisible. He kept glancing across the ballroom, smiling. At first, I thought he was being polite. The girl he kept looking at didn't even seem his type. Too young, too quiet, standing alone by the champagne table like she didn't belong. But when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, something raw, familiar. Afterward, I asked him. He shrugged, said she was an intern. Barely know her, he muttered. But the way he said it, barely, landed like a lie that had already grown roots. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. We had 12 years together. Mortgage, vacations, matching coffee mugs. I kept telling myself, we're solid, we've survived worse. But love doesn't always die with a bang. Sometimes it dies in silence. When he stops noticing your perfume, when his phone buzzes at 2 a.m. and he turns it over, face down. I buried my suspicions under routines, booking our anniversary trip, organizing his suits, reminding him about his mother's birthday. I played the part of the devoted wife, while something feral in my chest whispered that everything I knew was slipping through my fingers. Then came the hospital. I didn't even mean to be there. A friend had gone into labor early. I brought flowers, walked into the wrong hallway, and there he was, holding a baby, kissing a woman, smiling like I had never seen him smile before. And in that moment, I realized he hadn't just cheated. He had started another life, one where I didn't exist. I didn't confront him that day. I turned around and walked away, the bouquet still in my hand, because I needed to know, how long had this been going on? How many nights had he come home to me with that woman's perfume still clinging to his collar? How many lies had I swallowed to protect a marriage he had already abandoned? I was no longer a wife. I was the other woman in his story. But not for long, because secrets like that don't stay buried, and I was done being silent. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table long after the lights went out, staring at the untouched dinner I had made for a man who was now a stranger. My hands trembled as I gripped the wine glass, not from rage. Rage would have been easier, but from something worse. Certainty. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't hormonal or emotional or imagining things like he used to say with a half laugh and a kiss on my forehead. I was right. He had another life, a child, a woman, a secret so complete it had a heartbeat and a name. And now I had to find out just how deep the betrayal went. By morning, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I wanted the truth, not his version of it. I wanted to know how long he had been sleeping next to me while building a future with someone else. I wanted to know what he forgot to erase. I started with his phone. He was in the shower, humming like a man without guilt, while I sat on the edge of the bed holding his phone in my hand like it might burn me. I knew the passcode. I'd known it for years. It opened with a soft click, and there it was. Photos. Not of her, he was smarter than that. But there were hints. Receipts from restaurants I had never been to, Uber rides at odd hours, Venmo payments labeled milk and diapers, and once, for her doctor. Texts to someone saved as James, work, that didn't sound like business at all. She smiled today. You should have seen it. I'm sorry I missed the ultrasound. Tell her I'll make it up to her. I read each word like a punch to the chest. Then I made copies of everything, screenshots, downloads, backups, because I knew what he'd say when I confronted him. You misunderstood. It's not what it looks like. But it was exactly what it looked like. I was living with a liar. He came out of the bathroom, shirtless, towel around his waist, still humming. He kissed me on the cheek like always. I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt everything all at once. Did you sleep okay? He asked, running a hand through his wet hair. I nodded. Yeah, just a weird dream. And it was, wasn't it? A nightmare I hadn't woken up from. Later that day, I followed him. I told him I had brunch with friends. Instead, I sat in my car 2 blocks away, watching him walk into a small brick building in a part of town we never visited together. A modest apartment complex. He didn't even hesitate. I saw her. She opened the door before he knocked, like she'd been waiting. She had the baby in her arms. He kissed her. Then the baby. Then walked inside. I stayed in the car for 47 minutes. 47. Long enough to cry, to scream silently, to promise myself I would never let this destroy me, and to realize that I had been second in my own marriage for a long, long time. When he came home that evening, I was waiting. Not with accusations, not with rage, with silence. He sat across from me at the dinner table, eating the pasta I cooked, telling me about a board meeting that probably never happened. He looked me in the eye, and I realized something terrifying. He didn't feel guilty. He thought he was untouchable, that I would never find out, that if I did, I wouldn't leave, that I couldn't leave. He was wrong. Because I wasn't planning an argument, I was planning an exit, and he wouldn't see it coming. I never realized how much of our life he had borrowed from me. The house, the career, the family dinners, the illusion of loyalty. So much of it was built on my choices, my sacrifices, my love. And yet there I was, staring at a man who shared his time, his body, and his blood with another woman. And she didn't even have to fight for it. That morning, I stood in front of our closet for a long time. Half the hangers were mine, neatly spaced and color-coded. The other half, his. Shirts still with dry cleaning tags, suits I had picked for him, shoes I cleaned after every business trip. But suddenly, all of it felt borrowed, not mine, just part of a set. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You're quiet lately," he whispered, kissing the back of my neck. I forced a smile. "Just tired." "Let's get away this weekend," he said. "Just the two of us, you and me." I blinked. Was this guilt, damage control, or was he just trying to maintain the lie? I nodded. Sure, that sounds nice. But inside, I was already gone. That afternoon, I drove to the apartment complex. I needed more than digital proof. I needed to feel what he had given her, to understand the depth of it. I waited until I saw her leave. She was pushing a stroller, humming a lullaby, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but I knew the face. Knew the softness in her jaw, the quiet confidence of a woman who thought she'd won. When she disappeared down the street, I walked up to her door. It was unlocked. I hesitated, but just for a second. The place was small, cozy, minimal, but everywhere I turned, there were pieces of him. A bottle of his cologne on the dresser, a baseball cap he hadn't worn at home in months, a picture on the shelf, him holding the baby, both of them laughing like time had stopped just for them. I covered my mouth to muffle the sound that came out. In the corner of the room, on a tiny table beside the crib, sat a printed document, a lease. My husband's name was on it, his signature, his ID number, the move-in date from almost a year ago. A year. We had celebrated our wedding anniversary 3 weeks after he moved her in. I stood in the center of that little apartment, the walls pressing in around me, and I realized I was the outsider, the extra, the inconvenience. When I got back in the car, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just drove to the lawyer's office. "I'm not sure I'm ready to file," I told the receptionist, "but I need to understand what my options are." She looked at me the way women do when they know, deep down, exactly why you're there. She handed me a form. "When you are ready," she said softly. I didn't go home after that. I drove to the ocean instead. I sat on the hood of my car and let the wind wrap around me like a stranger that somehow felt safer than the man I married. The waves didn't care about broken vows or hidden children. They just kept coming, again and again, like nothing could stop them. Maybe that's what healing would look like too. Messy, loud, unstoppable. That night, when he came home, I kissed him. Hard. The kind of kiss that confused him, made him pull back and blink at me with suspicion. "What's that for?" he asked, half smiling. "For everything," I said. And he never saw the edge behind my words. He had made a second life. Now, I was going to take the first one back. The worst part about being lied to isn't the betrayal. It's the routine. The fact that he still came home at 6:45 every evening, tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl I bought on our honeymoon in Santorini, kissed me on the cheek like it was muscle memory, and asked, "How was your day?" Like nothing was broken. Like he hadn't built a cradle for another woman's child. I started paying attention to the details, things I once ignored because I trusted him. Now, everything felt like evidence. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he left the office later. He'd say he had strategy meetings. But the receipts in his glove compartment told a different story. A cafe in her neighborhood, a pharmacy 2 blocks from her apartment, a box of diapers in the trunk, still in the back corner beneath his gym bag. I kept my smile steady. I kept cooking dinner. I kept making the bed every morning and kissing him goodbye every night. Because if I wanted to burn this all down, I had to be precise, controlled. I needed him to think I was still asleep. That weekend, I followed him again. I told him I was spending the afternoon with my sister. He kissed my forehead and told me to have fun. He drove straight to her place. Again. Only this time, he didn't go inside. He met her outside. She handed him the baby. Just handed him the baby. Like it was normal. Like this exchange had happened a dozen times before. He looked so comfortable holding her. The way his hands naturally cradled the infant. The way his lips brushed the baby's hair. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not in fury, but in grief. I had wanted that moment with him. For years, I had imagined what he would be like as a father. I dreamed of us painting a nursery, midnight feedings, our child asleep on his chest while I watched with a heart full of love. But that moment wasn't mine anymore. It had been stolen and gifted to someone else. And he never even asked permission. Back home, I poured a glass of red wine and sat at my laptop. My hand hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then I opened a blank document and started writing. Not a letter, not a diary entry, a plan. A full inventory of the assets we shared. The house, the accounts, the car. I listed everything under my name, everything under his, and everything that sat in both. I looked up custody laws, not because we had a child, but because I needed to know if his new life could impact what I was legally owed. Then I made another list, things I had given up for him. The promotion I turned down because we didn't want to live in separate cities. The 2 miscarriages I mourned alone while he traveled for work. The friend I stopped talking to because he said she wasn't good for our energy. It was a long list, longer than I expected. The next day, I visited a second lawyer, a woman this time. She read my notes, looked me in the eyes, and said, "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." That was all I needed to hear. I didn't file the papers, not yet, but I had them in a folder tucked beneath my sweaters, my quiet weapon. At dinner that night, he told me we should take a trip. Just us. Get away from all this noise, he said. What noise? I asked, cutting into my steak. He shrugged. Work's been intense. You've seemed stressed. Stressed? I wanted to laugh, or scream, or throw the wine glass across the room. But instead, I leaned over the table, smiled sweetly, and said, "Let's do it. Let's get away. Just you and me." He looked relieved. He thought I was still playing wife. He didn't know the next destination on our itinerary would be rock bottom, and I'd booked us both a one-way ticket. He booked a suite with an ocean view, white sand, private balcony, champagne waiting in a silver bucket, chilled to perfection. The kind of romantic escape most women would dream of. The kind of place where people come to fall back in love. But I wasn't there to fall back into anything. I was there to watch him lie one more time. On the flight, he held my hand like he used to, thumb tracing lazy circles against my skin. I let him believe this trip was his idea, that it meant something more than it did. He kept looking at me with those practiced eyes, tender, calm, a touch of longing, like he wanted to convince me that everything was okay again. But I had seen the truth, and it was wrapped in a pink blanket with his nose and her smile. That first night, we had dinner on the beach, a private table, string lights glowing above us, soft music, too perfect. He reached for my hand. "I feel like I've been distant lately," he said, voice low, sincere. "But I want to fix that." My stomach turned. Distant, that's what he called starting a second family? I nodded. "I know, I've felt it too." "You're still the one I want," he said. He said it like a promise, like a dare. I leaned forward and smiled. "Then prove it." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "No secrets, no half-truths, no disappearing acts." I tilted my head. "Let's start over, from zero. You tell me your truths, I'll tell you mine." He chuckled nervously, then reached for his wine. "Sounds intense for a vacation." I kept my voice even. Sometimes paradise is where the lies finally suffocate. He didn't respond. The next morning, he was up before me, out for a walk. When he came back, he had coffee and croissants, acting like the man I married. I looked through his phone while he was in the shower. Again. He had deleted everything. No texts, no call logs, no photos, no apps. A digital cleanse. He was trying to erase her. But not because he wanted me. Because he was afraid of losing everything. After breakfast, we rented bikes and rode along the coast. The wind tangled my hair. The sun kissed his skin. We looked like a couple deeply in love. A tourist asked if we were on our honeymoon. He laughed and said, 10 years in, but she still gives me butterflies." I smiled, but inside I was screaming. That night, I stood on the balcony and watched the ocean shimmer under the moonlight. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "Do you ever think about starting fresh, a new chapter?" My heart twisted. He meant with me, but he had already started a new chapter. He just hadn't told me which book I was in anymore. I turned to him. "You ever want kids?" I asked softly. His body stiffened, just slightly. "We've talked about that," he said carefully. "Timing hasn't been right." "Do you ever think the timing was just right with someone else?" I asked. He stared at me for a second too long, then smiled. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, stepping back. "I'm being honest. You should try it." We didn't speak the rest of the night. He slept on the couch, and I didn't sleep at all. I was done playing his devoted wife. When we got back home, I would take the gloves off. He didn't know it yet, but his perfect little lie was about to be exposed to the very world he tried to keep it from. because I wasn't the only one watching anymore. And she, the other woman, had started talking. The message came at 2:17 a.m. I woke up to the faint buzz of my phone vibrating under the pillow. Half asleep, I reached for it, expecting a weather alert or a promotional text. But it was from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I think it's time you saw this." There were 4 attachments. My hands were trembling before I even opened the first one. The photos were grainy, taken in low light, but unmistakable. Him, shirtless, holding the baby in his lap, bottle feeding her. His head bent slightly, lips brushing her tiny forehead. A moment so intimate, so tender, that for a second, I forgot I was supposed to hate him. The second photo was worse. Them in bed. He was asleep, one arm draped around her. The girl, the same girl from the hospital. Her face half covered by his chest, her hand resting on his bare skin. There was no doubt, no room for interpretation. It was raw, unfiltered truth. The third was a close-up of the baby in his arms at what looked like a birthday party. Balloons, cake, a banner that read, "Happy First, Mia." Mia. My husband had named a child. He had blown up balloons, smiled for pictures, celebrated her life. All while coming home to me. The fourth photo? A sonogram. His name printed in the corner. Not just her baby, his baby. His name. His child. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, cry, throw the phone across the room. But instead, I just sat, like my body couldn't move under the weight of the truth anymore. I wrote back, "Why are you sending me this?" The reply came instantly, "Because I was stupid enough to believe him too." Her name was Juliana. She was 24. She met him at a charity event he helped sponsor. He told her he was separated, said I was difficult, that our marriage was ending, that he was just staying with me until things settled. He told her everything she needed to hear to make betrayal feel like romance. They had been seeing each other for almost 2 years. She didn't know I was still sleeping beside him every night. She didn't know he hadn't filed for divorce. Until recently. He stopped showing up, she wrote, stopped answering, would come over late, never stayed. Then he stopped coming at all. She wasn't reaching out to ruin my life. He already did that. She was reaching out because she was done being quiet, done covering for him, done being ashamed. I stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night, numb. The photos kept flashing in my mind. The curve of his smile, the way he cradled her, the sonogram, the life I never got. At 7 a.m., he walked into the kitchen, yawning, scratching his jaw like it was any other Monday morning. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No hate, no love, just absence. "You okay?" he asked, grabbing a mug. I nodded. "I think we should talk tonight," I said evenly. He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time in months, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Fear. Not because he knew what I had seen, but because for the first time, I didn't look like his wife. I looked like his reckoning. I made lasagna, his favorite. He walked through the front door like nothing had changed, like our entire marriage wasn't rotting underneath him. He kissed my cheek, complimented the smell, and took off his jacket like this was just another normal Tuesday. But tonight wasn't going to end like any other night. He sat across from me, napkin folded neatly in his lap, wine glass half full, shoulders relaxed. I watched him eat 3 bites before I said anything. "We need to talk," I said, setting my fork down. He glanced up, chewing slowly, already calculating his responses. "Okay," he said, calm, controlled. "What's on your mind?" I didn't flinch. I know about Juliana. His fork froze midair. I saw the twitch in his jaw, the reflexive tightening of his throat as he swallowed. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly. "Where did you hear that name?" I said. "She sent me pictures," I said, 4 of them, and a message, and the truth. He blinked once, twice, then gave me the expression I hated more than anything, detached disappointment, like I was overreacting. "It's not what you think," he said. A lie. Still, even now. "I think you have a daughter with another woman," I said evenly. He opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed his hands together like he could make the guilt disappear. Finally, he nodded. Once. Slow. Heavy. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. I laughed, quiet and sharp. "Do babies just happen now?" "I made a mistake." "No," I snapped. "You made a family." He stood, started pacing, palms on his hips, looking for words that might make it hurt less. "I was confused," he began. "Stop. I thought we were drifting." "Stop. You and I haven't been." "I said stop," I shouted. He froze. I stood too, my chair screeching back across the hardwood floor. "You made me think I was crazy," I said. "You made me doubt every instinct I had. You lied to my face, kissed me goodnight, made love to me, and then you went and built a whole other life. One with birthday parties, sonograms, a name." "Mia," he whispered. My heart twisted. "Don't you dare say her name to me." He sat down again, like the weight of it had finally crashed onto him. "I was going to tell you." "When?" I snapped. "When she graduated? When I showed up at your second wedding?" Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall, not yet. "I stayed," I said, voice shaking. "I stayed after the miscarriages, after your silence, after every time you said you weren't ready. I grieved for children we couldn't have, while you were holding a baby I didn't know existed." He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry is a bandage. This is a bullet wound." Silence fell between us. The lasagna sat cold on the table, untouched. "Do you love her?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That was the last conversation we ever had as husband and wife. Because the next day, I packed my things, and I took my name with me. The silence after a storm is the loudest thing I've ever heard. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't scream or cry or make a scene. I just walked. With one suitcase, a pair of sunglasses, and a heart that had finally decided it had bled enough. He didn't follow me. That told me everything I needed to know. I moved into a short-term rental on the east side of the city. It was small. 1 bedroom, creaky floors, no dishwasher, but it was mine. Every pillow, every drawer, every inch of it untouched by his lies. No ghost of his voice in the walls, no scent of betrayal in the sheets. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I called my mother and told her I needed time. She asked if he had hit me. I said, no, he just erased me. She understood. Somehow, women always do. I blocked his number the next day. I didn't want his apologies. I didn't want his panic. I wanted distance. I wanted clarity. I wanted to look in the mirror and not see a woman who stayed. The emails came first, then voicemails from burner numbers, then flowers. White roses, my favorite. Or they used to be. He wrote, "I made a mistake. Please don't let this be the end." It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, 100 choices. And now I was choosing myself. I started therapy. It felt awkward at first, sitting across from a stranger and pulling my heart out piece by piece. But the words came easier than I thought. I was his home, I said one session, and he built a vacation house on the side. That made my therapist flinch, then nod. I went back to work. I took the long way home every evening. I listened to music I hadn't played in years. I wore red lipstick. Not for anyone else, just to see color on my face again. One morning, I walked past a toy store and froze. A little girl was standing in the window staring up at a carousel horse. She had dark brown eyes, almond-shaped, just like his. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. But I stood there for a long time, wondering if that little girl, Mia, would grow up knowing what kind of man her father really was, if she would know that she was born into a lie, if she would ever ask about the woman he left behind, and what I would say if she ever found me. That night, I got a message from Juliana. "I thought you should know. He showed up here today. He cried, said he lost everything. I told him it was never his to begin with." I read it twice, then smiled, because she finally saw through him too. The women in his life were no longer willing to orbit his shame. We had stepped into the sun. The next morning, I filed the papers. I didn't flinch when I signed the line next to the word petitioner. I didn't shake when I handed them over. I just walked out of that office with my head held high. I wasn't the woman whose husband had a baby with someone else. I was the woman who survived it, and that would be the beginning of everything. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, though the air conditioning was set to Arctic, but the mood, the tension, the way people looked at me like I was supposed to break, supposed to fall apart, fall to my knees, beg for something, anything. But I didn't cry. Not when the judge read our names aloud, not when they called me petitioner, not even when my husband walked in wearing that same damn navy suit I bought him last Christmas. He looked nervous, hair too perfect, tie knotted too tight, face pale under the courtroom fluorescence. He scanned the room, probably expecting me to glance away, to show even a flicker of hurt. But I didn't blink. He sat across from me at that long, polished table, like a man who finally realized he had run out of time. We didn't speak. Our lawyers did all the talking. Civil, clean, cold. Words like division of property and irreconcilable differences floated in the air like smoke, terms meant to sanitize destruction. There was a moment, brief, sharp, when his lawyer brought up emotional distress as a mitigating factor for his behavior. I nearly laughed. He cheated. He lied. He created a child in secret. And now he wanted sympathy? My lawyer shut it down quickly. Facts don't need embellishment when the truth is this brutal. We presented evidence, photos, messages, financial records. His double life laid out like exhibits in a museum of betrayal. He didn't argue, didn't protest. He just sat there, jaw clenched, watching his life unravel stitch by stitch. At one point, I caught his eyes, and for the first time, I saw regret. Not because he lost me, but because he lost control. After the session ended, I stepped into the hallway to breathe. The courthouse echoed with footsteps, whispered drama from other lives, other implosions. Juliana was waiting outside. I hadn't expected her to come. She wore no makeup, held a diaper bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. Her eyes looked heavier than the last time we spoke. "She's in the car," she said softly, "asleep." I nodded, unsure what else to say. "He told me you were cold," she said. My eyebrows raised. "That you weren't emotional enough, that you pushed him away." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She looked down at her shoes. "He said the same things to me. Now I realize he doesn't know how to handle a woman who doesn't fall apart." I exhaled, slowly. She looked up again. "I just wanted to say thank you for not letting him win." I didn't feel like I'd won anything, but I did feel free. "Take care of her," I said. "She didn't choose any of this." "I will." I turned and walked away, down the courthouse steps, into sunlight that felt too bright for the day I legally ended my marriage. Strangers passed by, none of them knowing what had happened behind those walls, what it took for me to get here. But I knew. I didn't cry in court, not because I was cold, but because I had cried enough to flood every courtroom in the city. Now, I was done, not broken, not bitter, just done. And finally, beginning. The papers were signed, finalized, stamped, filed, divorced. The word didn't sting like I thought it would. It sat heavy on my chest, sure, but not like heartbreak. It felt like closing a door that had been left open in a storm for far too long. And now, the wind was gone. The mess was mined clean, but at least it was mine. I spent the first few days afterward floating through a silence that was no longer hollow, but calm. No more double-checking his location. No more pretending I didn't notice the shift in his voice when he spoke my name. No more waiting. He was gone, and so was the version of me that let him stay. I went back to our old house just once, not to linger, not to cry, but to collect the last of what he hadn't already claimed. The driveway felt smaller. The garden I once tended had wilted into something wild. The curtains were drawn. The welcome mat was gone. A man was living here, but not a husband. Inside, the air smelled like cologne and emptiness. I moved through the rooms like a ghost revisiting the site of her own death. In our bedroom, I found a box he had left on the bed, labeled simply, "Yours." Inside were the pieces of me he didn't want, books I loved that he never read, photos of my family he never liked to visit, a necklace he once said looked too much like my mother's. At the bottom was a letter, handwritten. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I broke something sacred. I just wanted you to know I did love you. I still do. He signed it with my name, his old habit. But it wasn't his to use anymore. I left the letter behind, let him keep it like the rest of his empty words. I drove back to my apartment and lit a candle for myself. No occasion, just survival. That night, I made dinner for one, put on jazz, ate barefoot in the kitchen with the windows open, and when I washed the dishes afterward, I caught myself smiling. It wasn't a big smile, not radiant, not cinematic, but it was real, and it had been a long time. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Juliana stood there, dark circles under her eyes, baby on her hip, keys dangling from her wrist. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know where else to go." I stepped aside. She came in, sat down. The baby, Mia, was asleep against her shoulder. She didn't look like him anymore. She looked like a girl who deserved better. Juliana's voice cracked as she spoke. "He's not around anymore. He said he needs space." I almost laughed. Space, after building 2 lives and wrecking both? "I'm not here to ask for anything," she added. I thought maybe you'd want to meet her." My breath caught. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't a test. It was a moment of grace. I sat beside her, eyes on the tiny sleeping child. She stirred slightly, fist clenched near her cheek, little curls pressed against Juliana's shoulder. She looked up at me. "I named her Mia because it means mine, but the truth is, I never felt like I owned anything in this story. He made me feel like I was stealing." I blinked back tears. "You weren't." "I know," she whispered. "Now I do." We sat in silence, 2 women who had loved the same man and been broken by him in different ways. But in that quiet moment, I didn't see her as the other woman, and she didn't see me as the bitter ex-wife. We were just survivors, and between us slept the only good thing he ever left behind. Juliana stayed for tea. Not because we were friends, not because either of us wanted to play pretend, but because life, in its brutal irony, had tethered us to the same wound, and somehow we both needed to sit in it for a while. She held the baby in one arm and stirred honey into her tea with the other, hands shaking just slightly. I offered sugar, then thought better of it. She looked like someone who had long stopped chasing sweetness. "Do you ever think it was our fault?" she asked, eyes locked on the swirling cup. My first instinct was rage. How dare she? But then I saw the way her voice cracked at the edges, the way her lip trembled just enough to reveal how many nights she had probably asked herself that question alone. "No," I said, "but I know he made us feel that way." She nodded. "He told me you were cold, controlling." I chuckled bitterly. "He told me you were a mistake, a one-time thing, that you manipulated him." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look surprised. "That's how he won," I continued. "He kept us from ever seeing each other as human." And now here we were, In my tiny kitchen, sipping tea, sharing stories like war veterans comparing scars from the same battlefield. Mia stirred in her sleep. I glanced at her, so small, so unaware of the chaos she was born into. Yet somehow, I didn't feel anger when I looked at her. I felt something closer to mercy. "She deserves better," I said. "She will have better," Juliana whispered. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you hate me?" The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. I had hated her. I had imagined screaming at her, blaming her, tearing her apart with the sharp edges of my pain. But now, looking at her, this young woman who had been fed the same polished lies, used for the same selfish escape, I couldn't summon hatred anymore. "No," I said at last, "I don't hate you. I just hate who we had to become to survive him." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. She left an hour later. I stood in the doorway, watching her strap Mia into the car seat. The little girl blinked up at me with those same almond-shaped eyes, his eyes, but softer now, less haunting. "Do you want to hold her?" Juliana asked suddenly. I froze. "I mean, you don't have to," she added quickly. I stepped forward. Hands trembling, I reached down and lifted the child. She didn't cry. She didn't even squirm. She laid her cheek against my chest and exhaled like she knew, somehow, that I wasn't a stranger to pain. I held her for 27 seconds. Then I handed her back. That night, I didn't dream about him. I dreamt of myself, standing in the middle of the ocean, no longer drowning, just floating, weightless, whole. He had taken so much, but he hadn't taken everything, because here I was, still standing, still healing, still me. It had been 3 weeks since I'd seen him. 3 weeks since the courthouse. 3 weeks since I held the baby he never told me about. 3 weeks since I tasted closure on the tip of a teacup, seated across from the woman who once wore his lies like love letters. And in those 3 weeks, something strange happened. I didn't cry, not once. I didn't scream or break things. I didn't drink too much, or text him at midnight, or scroll through old photos wishing for rewind. I didn't do any of the things I thought I would, the things I feared I'd become. Instead, I found something quieter, peace. Grief didn't leave in a dramatic exit. It slipped out the back door while I was busy living. I found myself humming again, absently, while folding laundry. I danced alone in the living room when my favorite song came on. I repainted the kitchen cabinets a bold emerald green, just because I never liked his beige. And one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't see the woman he left. I saw the woman he never truly deserved. My therapist once told me, "There's a version of you waiting on the other side of all this pain, and when you meet her, she won't recognize him at all." I was starting to believe her. Then, he called. From a new number, unknown. I didn't answer. The voicemail was short, quiet, almost embarrassed. "I heard you sold the house. I guess it's real now. I hope you're okay." "No, I miss you. No, I'm sorry." Just static between the words, like even his guilt was tired now. I didn't call back. I didn't owe him that. Instead, I opened my laptop and bought a plane ticket to Barcelona. Not because I needed to escape, but because I could. He had always said traveling alone was dangerous for someone like me, too impulsive, too trusting. He meant too free. So, I booked the window seat. I told no one except my sister and my therapist. I packed lightly. Books, journals, a red dress he once told me was too loud. Loud is exactly what I wanted now. My flight was in 4 days. That same week, Juliana sent me a photo. Mia in a tiny red coat, grinning at a park swing. A second photo followed. Mia curled up on a couch, holding a stuffed rabbit. The caption simply read, "She's safe. and she's happy. I stared at the screen for a long time, not with regret, but with relief, because the little girl who could have been my daughter didn't have to carry the weight of the man who broke us both. Juliana and I would never be friends, not really, but we were something deeper now, witnesses. We saw each other survive. That made us more than enemies, more than strangers. It made us human. That night, I stood on my balcony and watched the moon rise through the city haze. The sky was clear, crisp, the kind of night where you can hear yourself think. And I thought, I don't want revenge. I don't want closure. I don't even want justice. I want joy. Real, ordinary, inconvenient, dazzling joy. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed I could have it. I was already in Barcelona when he showed up again. Not physically, but in the form of a voicemail, left at exactly 3:12 a.m., the kind of hour when regret doesn't just whisper, it begs. I miss her laugh. I miss your laugh. I think I finally get it now. I'm ready to be the man I should have been. I'm ready to be a real father, if you'll let me. I listened to it while sitting on the roof of my Airbnb, sipping coffee that was too strong and staring out at a city that owed me nothing, but somehow felt like a reward. It was funny how he always used the word ready, like it was a switch, like he could just decide, after burning everything to ash, to show up with a fire extinguisher and call it healing. Too late. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I was finally done being the soft place he landed after every disaster he caused. That afternoon, I wandered through the Gothic Quarter with a paper map, letting the cobblestone streets take me where they pleased. No itinerary, no appointments, no man waiting for me at home with secrets behind his eyes. Just me. And for once, that was enough. I visited a tiny bookstore that smelled like ink and old ambition. I found a copy of a poetry collection, in English, Margaret Atwood, and tucked it under my arm, like a promise. A man smiled at me on the metro. I smiled back, and then I looked away. I wasn't ready, but I was open. That night, Juliana sent another photo. Mia at the beach, her feet in the sand, arms wide, like the whole world was hers. She asked about her daddy today, Juliana wrote. I didn't know what to say. I stared at the message for a long time, not with bitterness, not with anger, just a heavy, aching truth. She'll ask more, I replied, and one day she'll know it's okay to love him and still protect herself from him. Juliana replied with just one word, thank you. I put my phone away and stepped out onto the terrace. Barcelona was glowing, the streets humming below, alive with people who didn't know my name, didn't care about my past, didn't look at me with pity. Freedom had never felt so quiet, so sacred. I closed my eyes and imagined telling my younger self, he won't choose you the way you deserve, but one day you'll stop needing him to. And when that day comes, you'll be on a rooftop in Spain, wearing red lipstick, laughing like you've never cried. The thing no one tells you about healing is that it doesn't always end in a speech. Sometimes there's no confrontation, no last slam of the door, no dramatic face-to-face where one person breaks and the other walks away victorious. Sometimes healing is quiet. It looks like walking past a bakery and not thinking of him. It sounds like laughing with strangers and forgetting for a second what you've survived. It feels like peace arriving unannounced, settling softly into the space where pain used to live. I hadn't spoken to him since the last voicemail. That was 2 months ago. I didn't block the number anymore, but I didn't answer either. I didn't need to. I had found something better than revenge. I had found indifference. One afternoon, back home, I stopped by a community bookstore to drop off a few novels I knew I wouldn't read again. The woman at the counter smiled, thanked me, and asked if I wanted to browse. I almost said no, but I wandered through the aisles anyway. That's when I saw him. Not my ex-husband, his mother. She looked older, thinner, still polished, like always. Beige cardigan, pearls, the soft air of a woman trained to endure scandal with poise. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a cautious step forward. "I heard you're doing well," she said. I nodded. "I am." She glanced down at the stack of books in her hand. I didn't know about everything until after. I believed her, because shame has a way of echoing louder in mothers. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "Don't be," I replied. "You didn't break me." There was silence, the weight of what we both didn't say hanging in the air. Finally, she asked, "Do you hate him?" I looked her in the eyes, then said simply, "No," because I didn't. Not anymore. Not because he earned my forgiveness, but because I refused to carry the rot of his choices in my chest any longer. That evening, I lit a candle on my windowsill, one of those small rituals that had become mine. No deeper meaning, just light in a quiet space. I scrolled through my phone and opened the photo Juliana sent a few days before. Mia painting with her fingers, cheeks smudged with color, her smile wide and unaware. She didn't know it yet, but she came from broken things. And still, she bloomed. I thought about replying. I thought about asking how Juliana was doing, but I didn't. Because not everything needs a circle closed. Some stories end not with punctuation, but with a pause. I closed the photo, put down my phone. Then I did something I hadn't done since the beginning. I whispered, "Thank you." Not to him, to me. To the version of me that stayed when it hurt. To the version that walked when it got worse. To the woman who rebuilt herself without waiting for permission. That night, I slept without dreams. 1 year later, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a little boutique on the edge of town, slipping into a dress I would have never dared to wear before. Red, bold, backless, unapologetic. The saleswoman gasped softly behind me. "It looks like it was made for you." I didn't respond right away, because I was too busy staring at the woman in the reflection. The curve of her spine, the stillness in her eyes, the soft lines of a smile that hadn't been borrowed, begged for, or faked. It was me, but it wasn't the version he knew. She was someone new. Not bitter, not broken, just free. Outside, the city was humming with early summer. Street musicians playing for strangers, kids chasing pigeons, couples laughing on cafe patios. Life, in all its beautiful chaos, moving forward. And I was too. I didn't remarry. I didn't fall into someone else's arms to prove I was lovable. Instead, I traveled. I learned to cook for one without feeling lonely. I said yes to things that scared me. Solo hikes, midnight poetry readings, salsa dancing in rooms filled with people who didn't know my past. And somehow, in the quiet after grief, I found myself. I met Juliana once more, at a park under a sycamore tree, where Mia was running barefoot through the grass. She was bigger now, louder. She laughed like the world was hers. Juliana waved from the bench. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. There's a kind of bond between women who survive the same man. Not friendship, not forgiveness, just understanding. As I got up to leave, Mia ran over and hugged my legs like I was hers. I crouched and looked her in the eye. "You are loved," I whispered. She nodded, because of course she was. She had no idea how hard we'd all fought to make that true. Later that night, I found one last message from him, unopened, weeks old. The preview read, "I still think about you." I deleted it, without reading the rest, because the truth was, he didn't deserve to be part of this chapter. This final one, the one where I didn't just survive what he did, I outgrew it. I looked around my apartment, sunlight pouring across the kitchen tiles, music playing low in the background, a half-finished painting on the easel near the window. This was my life now, not rebuilt, reborn. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like the woman he left behind. I felt like the woman he could never touch again.